Shalom, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another segment of Living with the Times. We are in the midst of the 3 weeks between two fast days where we remember the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem and other events in Jewish history. Later this week is Rosh Chodesh Av, the new month of Av. And many people call the month of Av Menachem Av. Menachem comes from to give comfort. And so the question is, Av means father. So it's almost like it's saying literally, it's the month of giving comfort to the Father, our Father in heaven, or it's the month that God is giving us comfort. That's why the Shabbos after Tisha B'Av is called Shabbos Nachamu, where God tells the prophet to tell the people, comfort, comfort my people. Nachamu, Nachamu, Ami. So I learned from Rav Ginsburg that there's really 3 different levels of compassion. One level of compassion is that we should have compassion on every human being, because the simple idea of a soul coming from a heavenly abode into a physical material body and a world full of challenges, trials, tribulations, every soul is worthy of compassion. And then every Jew is worthy of compassion because of our history, because of everything we've gone through. A very, very difficult series of exiles, thousands of years. Every Jew deserves compassion. And the third level is that we should have compassion on God. Because if we could imagine when God created the world and human beings, we have to believe that God had a beautiful vision, a beautiful picture of how creation would be. And he gave us the greatest gift in the world called free will. And what can we say? We haven't always used our free will best, and the world certainly is not in the place that we all would want it. How much more so in God's eyes? And that we should have compassion on God as well. So this idea of compassion is talked about by the Slonim Rebbe in Netivat Shalom. And he explains that all of the exiles came about because of our actions. The prophets of Israel would come and warn the people that society is not just, there's a lack of morals and ethics, and if you don't change your ways, God is saying the temple is going to be destroyed, you're going to go into exile. And had we changed our ways, none of it had to happen. It wasn't written in stone. So each exile was what we'll call a measure for our own deeds. But the Slonim Rebbe says that the exile in Egypt was different. That the exile in Egypt wasn't per se for a reaction to our deeds, but it was something that the Jewish people had to go through in order to be able to fulfill our mission in the world, to be a light unto the nations. And that was dependent on a certain level of empathy and understanding and compassion that we would have for everyone based on our being slaves in Egypt and that whole experience. So this idea of compassion is so important. And during this time period, So we'll use the expression we're crying for our past, crying for the destruction of the temples, crying for our history of exile and oppression. And again, the Slonim Rebbe in Netivat Shalom questions, is that what the crying is about? And he said, it's done with, it happened. He said, of course we have to remember and feel and empathize and learn from it. He said, but the real deeper reason that we're crying is we haven't fixed it yet. In the present, had we fixed it, then Mashiach would be here. So he said that's the deepest thing is not so much crying for the past, though it is important to remember the past, but it's really crying that we just haven't learned the lessons to fix it yet. So the question is, what are we missing by not having a temple? It's so long ago. What are we missing? And so there are a number of ideas that I want to share very, very quickly. One of the things we're missing is once someone has a place that they call home, and then they have to leave that home, but the feeling goes with you forever. That feeling of being at home is such a fundamental need of a human being. And so when we used to go to the temple, we would have a spiritual feeling, I'm home. I'm close to the Shekhinah. I'm among my people. I feel I belong here. And I think you might have heard what I'm about to say from other people, but I've talked to many people, especially people who are getting on in age and they've never been to Israel, and then they finally come. And you ask them, well, what was it like? What was your experience? And almost inevitably, they'll say, the most amazing thing is I felt at home there. Now, this is an amazing thing. This is a person who spends their whole life outside of Israel. They come for 2 weeks as tourists, but they have this feeling. Some people say as soon as they get off the plane, they have this overwhelming feeling that I'm home. And that's what it was like when we went to the temple. So what we're missing, there is a little part of us that doesn't completely feel at home because we don't have the temple, because we don't have that part of ourselves that feels at home. Another thing that people miss about having the temple, and this is especially true in our day, the modern expression is someone has 1,000 friends on Facebook, but when it comes down to it, they have no one to talk to. And it's so paradoxical because the technology we have today is so phenomenal and it connects people all over the world. But also, there's so much talk about people have never felt so isolated and so alone as today. And when people would go to the temple, according to all accounts, there was this feeling of intimacy. People want to connect to other people, not necessarily over email or WhatsApp or Facebook or Telegram or Instagram or Twitter. Those things are really phenomenal, but it can't replace human warmth and intimacy. And so when we would go to the temple, we would just feel an intimate connection with godliness, an intimate connection with holiness. And the city of Jerusalem is called Ir HaKodesh, the holy city. Now the word Ir for city is the same letters, if you just pronounce it differently, is Er, which means to awaken. So what is it about Jerusalem that not having a temple means that it's not complete? Is when we come to Jerusalem, it's awakened within ourselves this desire for holiness, wanting to be holy, wanting to experience holy. And as much as we can experience it, if there is something missing right in the heart of Jerusalem, the temple, so part of that intimacy is just not there. And that's what we're longing for. That's what we're crying for, because we don't have it now. That's what the Slonim Rebbe was trying to teach us, is it's so important to remember what we're lacking for not having a temple, but it has to be like very relevant and feeling it today. And so there was a famous expression from Rabbi Nachman that he merited to come to Israel for about 9 months. And when he went back to Europe, people would just ask him, just like on the street, Rebbe, where are you going? And he would always say, I'm always going to Israel. I'm always going to Jerusalem. Because once you've felt like home here in Israel, here in Yerushalayim, then that becomes our home. And no matter how far away, we're always going to Israel.